getting pretty good at playing the game by then. And then we all started graduating, time to go to college. And most of the people in that early team, the serious players, were a year older than me. So in '72, started teams like Rutgers and Princeton, and those were probably the two best teams then. RPI, Tufts, a few others were and Hampshire College. Those were probably the best teams in the Northeast. The next year, my class certainly was way better than them. So we started the next tier of teams. Cornell was one of them, fall of '73, and nobody, unless you were from one of those high schools in New Jersey, had any idea what Ultimate Frisbee was. I knew I would be starting a team here. I didn't know how. I knew I wasn't very tolerant of incompetence.
Yeah, Captain.
So I was not exactly going to just put up a flyer and let anybody who thought it might be fun to throw a Frisbee come and play. So I basically said nothing about it, did nothing about it for the first month or so. Didn't even mention that such a game existed. And I played a little bit of basketball too, and was okay at that. And there was a court next to the Dust Bowl on West Campus, and I just spent the first month or so playing basketball and figuring out who were good targets to recruit. Eventually started back on my U-Haul 2 floor, picked out the few people that were good candidates and seemed good, and a couple of whom played basketball down there, and said, hey, today we're going to go try something new. It involves this Frisbee, and I'll show you how it works. And basically, for some crazy reason, enough of them said okay and came outside and gave it a try. Then we started just going out there pretty much anytime we were sitting around waiting for dinner or something, just throwing them around in the Dust Bowl. So I think we have here.
Yeah. Yes.
Back then, there was the email facilities were not very good in '74. And every time I tried to post something on Facebook, everybody else said, "I'm sorry, I'm not on Facebook." So really, the only way to schedule games, find another team to play, was you had to know somebody who went to those New Jersey high schools to be able to have gotten the little paper list of their school phone numbers once they got off, and none of us, pretty much nobody had even a telephone in their room. So we had a list of dorm hall phone numbers, and Larry Schindel, one of the Columbia High School grads from the year ahead of me, was always called by us as the general manager of the universe. He was not much of a player, but he loved organizing things. So he was in charge of keeping track of everybody's, and he would handwrite these lists and put them in the mailbox, and every once or twice a year you get an updated list of names and phone numbers of contacts in other teams. And we played our first game, I think it was a late fall '73. We drove up to Rochester, played against RIT indoors in a gym, and
very short end zone, right? Short end zones.
Oh yeah, pretty much. We did pretty well in any indoor games, that's for sure. And we won that first game, and so everybody enjoyed winning more. And I generally once I got that little hook in there and got people starting to play, they found it very difficult to quit. And
John was persuasive. Let's just say that.
So then as the year, so we have. There were 7 of us from that very first team here. There's myself and 6 others here. So
yeah, let's bring them out.
I'll say a little something about each one. We'll start with from my actual floor, which would be U-Haul 2 my freshman year. The first one, probably the first person to get sucked in, because he really didn't really have much of a choice. That year there was a big housing shortage on campus. I came in as a freshman, and they didn't have a room for me. I was in a lounge in U-Haul 2 with 4 other. I think there were 5 of us in our lounge. 5 of us in that lounge. One of them is Carl Barth. Here's Carl. So Carl had the least choice about playing. Once I told him he was playing, he couldn't say no because he couldn't keep me from getting to him when he was sleeping. Other people on that floor was Toby Lou down at the end of the same floor. People around in the early years of Ultimate, people for the early years still talk. Toby is one of the first names to come up when people talk about somebody who played with style, had great flair, and one of the most enjoyable people to watch playing.
I thought you were young when you were playing with me.
It was an honor to have my nose broken.
Next up in the original crew on that original floor in U-Haul 2, I'm not even going to bring one up. I'll bring up both Don and Chip at the same time because to a lot of people they're almost one person. They were so inseparable that they lived together.
Don and Chip.
Don Iveson and Chip O'Reilly. Now, I'll say a little bit about each of them. Now, people over the years, I get asked lots of times, well, everybody knew that I had a tendency to maybe look at the end zone once in a while and throw long once in a while and maybe huck a bit. And everybody would always ask me, who was your top receiver? Stick must have been the #1 receiver on that team. I said, well, no, Stick caught his fair share of passes, but he wasn't around that early. He didn't play the first couple of years. Then everybody said, well, okay, then obviously it's Jimmy Herrick. Jimmy Herrick probably led us in scoring lots of times, but there's absolutely no question that those first at least 3 years, 4 years, my favorite receiver and who I always looked to first and threw more goals to than anybody was Don Iveson. In fact, Jimmy Herrick gave him the nickname of Hoover. He was a Hoover because he was just a vacuum cleaner. I didn't have to throw it that accurately to him. As long as it didn't hit the ground before it got near him, he was going to catch it.
Way to go.
Chipper lived with Don for a couple of years after that, and Chipper was probably, we can't really pin down exactly when Cornell Ultimate officially became the Buds, but one thing's for sure, Chipper was involved. There was a time when we started getting a little bit more serious about needing to win, and if I'm going to play every minute of the game and run subs, anybody who wasn't in the starting lineup was likely to never get in the game because I'm never even going to think about subbing anybody. I'm just playing. So we needed somebody else to start keeping track of stuff like that. And so Chipper took on a new name and a new title and a new role and became Coach Roach. And it was not very long after that the Cornell Ultimate Frisbee team became the Buds. So I don't know if there's any connection there or how it possibly happened.
We want to know the year. What are we talking about? What year is that?
Okay, we're now finished with U-Haul 2, but we're still missing 2 more of the original team from '73 that are here. Next we have Joe Reyna. Is Joe here? Oh, there he is. Come on up, Joe.
Way to go.
And among the early players on the team, Joe, actually along with Toby, Joe and Toby had flat out speed. They could run. Joe came here as a freshman out of a New Jersey high school track team that set, was it the 4x4?
4x8.
The 4x880, the 2-mile relay set the national record. And And finally, there was the seventh person here who actually played in that original crew in '73. Knows who he is Bill Nye. So now, rather than tell you a story about how fast Bill was, I'll tell you a story about Bill that only people who were around back then said, didn't this happen? And everybody kept saying, I'm not sure. And I was pretty positive that it did. So I finally got it confirmed today or yesterday. So there was this time when basically all of these guys were really not supposed to do anything but practice their catching and throwing and playing ultimate. And so if they got hurt doing anything else, the coach was not happy. Bill was not in U-Haul 2, so I didn't have as tight a leash on him, I guess. He was in U-Haul 1, just the next building over, and decided that, I don't even know why, he can tell us why, that it would probably be a good idea to climb up the outside of U-Haul 1 and go in a window a couple of floors up. And it probably might have been a good idea if it had succeeded.
Well, it succeeded a couple, yeah.
Science.
So that's the original team. And after that, of course, there were lots of great players started coming through in the next couple of years. And once the team started, we actually existed and we're starting to have some success. Because bottom line is, the way it worked back then is you had your New Jersey high school player who started your team. If he was one of the better players from then who went to his high school and was a better recruiter than the others, he won.
You're such a man.
And pretty much, from my crew, virtually every one of them who went off and started a team just stuck a little flyer up and took whoever came along. So we won.
We were good.
We were good. The only team that we couldn't beat back then, and nobody could beat, was Rutgers. So that came up a little bit tonight. So I just figured, with the fact that there might be some current buds here tonight, I thought we needed to talk a little bit about Rutgers. Because there's some Rutgers history, and the youngsters need to learn that this can never, ever happen again. Rutgers was undefeated, and they started in '72. They were undefeated in '72. They were undefeated in '73. They were undefeated in '74. Rutgers, fair number. There was the first official nationals, something that could be called nationals, was the first intercollegiate tournament at Yale in '75. Rutgers won. Good for them. So eventually, they started getting a little bit older. We started getting a little bit better. Rutgers finally lost their first tournament game to the Buds. So unfortunately, I neglected to tell this story before this year's regionals. And now the Buds know, and all current Buds, and they need to pass it on to future Buds, is Buds do not lose to Rutgers ever again. So the reason Rutgers doesn't count in any discussion of those early years and those early college teams is that's the New Jersey State University. We had 8 high school teams in New Jersey. Every one of them graduated players who had been playing for 2, 3, 4 years of high school and sent them off to Rutgers. the best, in my opinion, relative to the state of the art of the game, the greatest player in the history of Ultimate was Irv Cow. And he was a year older than me, and he went to Rutgers and is one of the founders of the Rutgers team. But I put up our recruiting to his any old day. He didn't have to recruit anybody. He had an entire roster full of people who had already been playing for 3 or 4 years coming out of the New Jersey high school. So they went undefeated for a couple of years, a few years, while everybody else was learning how to catch and throw. And then they went from 70, what would it be, 76 or 7? They didn't make nationals again until this year. That's another reason. That's never happening again unless they redraw the regions and put them somewhere where they don't
That's on you, Robbie.
Now it's possible. It's possible that you guys, you might be able to attribute the fact that I keep going back to this and I keep beating on these poor youngsters now about this because I don't particularly pay a whole lot of attention to kindness. I'm looking for results and loyalty.
JC, tell them how these kids today can't pull it. They can't throw. Just lean into them. No, that's his thing. Don't come running to me. That's his deal.
Well, and basically, that gets us up to, that gets us to this year, and then covers up to finally knocking Rutgers out back then. 76, we were good. 77, we were even better. In terms of the state of the game and how good everybody else was, I think the 77 Buds were by far and away the best team in the country that year. And heading into nationals, we had probably, I would say, 4 of our starting 7 got hurt in the couple of months leading up. Don broke his right wrist. Don broke his throwing wrist. Jimmy Herrick was a Hall of Fame player. Separated his shoulder. A few people sprained ankles leading up to that. Don at least broke his wrist a couple of months before nationals that year and spent 2 months going out throwing, or maybe longer, throwing every single day, learning to throw left-handed well enough to essentially still be a starter for us at nationals, playing playing off-handed. And we actually hung in there very, very short-handed. Made it, in the quarterfinals, matched up against Rutgers. But
Are any of those guys here? Bring them up.
From 77?
Yeah?
Yeah, but you guys all knew Paul. There were lots of guys. And Paul come up here for sure. There's Paul Brenner. We got Edwin Stick Disasway, Jim Gardner, Stats again. Now that rule of Rutgers wasn't allowed to advance was in effect, so we were pretty depleted, but we had to play. It was a very, very poorly seeded tournament. We should not have been hitting Rutgers in that round that early, but it had to be done. Back then, there was no playing to our 11 points, 15 points. It was full out timed games. We played a full out timed game with them, tied. We played an overtime, tied. We played another overtime and beat them in double overtime, already past the scheduled start of the semifinal round. They gave us a half an hour to rest and go and play our semifinal match, which we still were pretty respectable in, and it was close, but we fell to Hampshire College in the semis in 77, even though we were much better than them, much better than any of the other teams that year, and vowed that we should have won. We knew we should have won, and a lot of people left. That was it. Most of the team was graduating. It was in 77. There were a few people still left. Paul was still here. Who else was here? Jim was still here. Derek was still here. Chris Byrne was still here. Keith, you were still here. Yeah, but
And the posters in there on that.
Yeah. Oh, so that finals in '77 was Hampshire College who beat us against Penn State. Somehow Penn State won that game and went and embarrassed themselves in the Nationals finals. But there's a poster of the finals in that game. Two of them actually on the auction blocks in there. It's a classic early Ultimate poster that has been in lots of books and online and everywhere. Photo taken by one of the early overall Frisbee and Ultimate photographers. His name's Dave Cohn. I've known him for a long time. And if you go and look at, there's a little piece of paper next to those two posters in there with a little hand-drawn type thing trying to identify him. It's two guys going up for a disc with a whole bunch of people in the background on the ground, seeing all these people about to crash, land on top of them. All those people about to get landed on are buds. Derek's one of those guys. Paul Brenner is one of those guys. Toby Lewis. But lots of that crew graduated and left. Jimmy Herrick left. Don Iveson left. Who were the other people who actually left? Bill left. Chip left. But and I left. Actually, I actually graduated in '76, but I wasn't done. So I went and took a job in New York and drove back up every weekend to continue playing. There were no eligibility rules, so I could play as long as I wanted. So I played in '77 and was very disappointed with all those injuries and the loss. So I said, hey, I'm not done. There's still no eligibility rules. I'm going again in '78. But I lost several of the very best players, and how are we going to win? We've played through most of the season, and when we're pretty good, we might have a chance, but that's not good enough. I want to expect to win and know we're going to win. So I spent, I went back to the old recruiting and being a little persuasive. I convinced Don that he didn't need to have a job. Jimmy Herrick didn't need to have a job.
Joe Johnson, 8-year plan.
I could rent a former frat house that was empty on Thurston Ave, and had plenty of bedrooms. Hey, we all know the plays. We all know my system. We all know that if I tell you to do something, you just do it. So come on back a couple of weeks before regionals, and we can get it all back together again. I've got rooms waiting for everybody. Stick was in that house. Don was in that house. Jimmy Herrick came back to that house. And I said, well, we might be a little rusty. We're a little old. We still need even more. I want to make sure that we've got enough firepower. So I said, well, I've been on the individual overall circuit forever. I went and recruited the guy whose name was on the discs almost every year for being the best overall Frisbee player in the world, and he liked Ultimate, never got to play in a good team. I brought Peter Blurm up to Ithaca to play for a couple of weeks before regionals. I decided that another guy who'd been playing for years and years and years and never got to play at the highest level should join us too. I brought in another thrower, Dave Cohn, to come and join us too. And
it takes more than pictures.
we were looking pretty solid. We had our struggles, but we went into regionals. You know, there were no multiple teams going to at regionals and multiple regions going to nationals. It was all about regionals, then Easterns, and then you go beat Santa Barbara. That's how it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, we didn't follow instructions. We cruised through regionals. I don't even remember regionals. There was nothing, man. There was. I don't even. Did they even make us go? Did they make us go to regionals, or did they just say just go to Easterns? You guys win regionals. I don't remember. Yeah.
Regionals.
So then, during the regular season though, there was this up and coming team that people were talking about that was on something like a 52-game winning streak, and were unbeatable, and they had this unbelievable zone that nobody could beat. So we decided we'd better go down there and play them at their place and figure out how to beat them. So we went down to play Glassboro, and they beat us pretty handily. But early on it was close. They beat us pretty handily, and we had afterwards, one of my favorite players from our team who had to leave early today was really upset. He was one of our emotional leaders. Ran our pregame sleep drills. We had pregame sleep drills, and he led them for us. We could roll over and sleep. We were very good at our warm up things. But he's not here, and he was extremely upset because he knew we were supposed to win that year, and we just got beat by this team that had won about 3,000 games in a row. I forget how many it was. And he was saying, "That's it, we're not going to win." And I said, "Are you kidding? That was perfect." He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I wasn't trying to beat them. I was just studying how their zone works, and take my word for it, there is no way they can beat us. There is no chance." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Look at them. Look at them. Look at our team. Look at them again. Who plays deep for them?" That one guy. I said, "Yep, he's pretty good. How much of the field do you think he can cover?" "Well, half of it, half of the end zone." "All right. Who's their next biggest guy?" They don't have one. They don't have a second tallest guy." I said, "That's right." How many hucks did I throw today against the zone? "Oh, not too many." "Well, every time I get the disc, we're hucking against them, and we're just going to destroy them in the air." Unfortunately, when we got to the finals against them at Easterns that year, it was a miserable day. There was probably steady 20-mile-an-hour winds with 40-mile-an-hour gusts. The great equalizer for these people who can't jump with us, can't throw with us, but our game was going to be in the air. We played our game anyhow, but it was a really tight game, and we did pull it out, what, by 2? 1. One, because we played till time in those days. It's not points. And we put on, in that win, a pretty amazing stall out the end of the game with that one.
It was a hook to the end zone, Eric on a block.
Yeah.
With the last second throw.
Yeah.
Last throw went out of bounds in the middle of the field.
Right.
I'm wrong there.
But, yeah.
Sorry.
Anyhow, it doesn't matter. We still hung on to beat them, and it was that strategy that beat them. We played them. Next up, Santa Barbara. Now, unfortunately, to beat Santa Barbara, we just need everybody to show up and play their average game, and we win. And pretty much everybody did, but one player in particular was counted on on the offensive end, and that's the one game in my life that I played absolutely horrendously, and it's the game I never wanted to be reminded of again. And it was fine because there were no iPads videoing everything. There were no high-res cameras. There was no video. There was no record of that game other than we lost and we shouldn't have. But then this year, fortunately, incredibly horrible quality, a video has turned up of that game. And I don't know why or how, but I did watch it. The best thing about it is I can't even tell which one is me half the time, but looking at all the turnovers and where they came from, they were probably me. So if anybody finds one of those, you're all buds. You're all tasked with destroying every copy of this video you can find. But that was it. I decided that was it. I couldn't keep bringing people back for multiple years after they graduated to win again. So 78 was it for the original crew. We all left, and I decided to join up with some buddies from mostly the Hampshire crew, who I was good friends with back then. I took, Toby had left the year before and already moved to Boston and was working there, was already hooked up with them. And Stick was moving to Boston anyhow. Paul was still here, but Paul was one of the best players in the world. So I was certainly not going to go and try to win without bringing him with me. So basically about half a dozen of the 78 buds joined me in Boston to create Boston Aerobics.
78 crew that's not up on stage yet, get them up. 78.
Another person who was already going to be in Boston then anyhow is Joe Johnson, who might be standing near Johnny G right now. Come on up here, Joe. Who was that? Chris Van Holmes was also on that 78 team. But for some reason in 78 we called Chris Van Holmes a CVB.
You can still call me CVB.
Anybody else here from 78? Anybody else here from 78? Danny Weiss left already. I think that's it for the 78 crew.
Did Keith leave?
Keith's here. Keith was already out with 77. Howard Jaffe was 78 as well.
Did you say Derek yet?
Yes, Derek's right here. Now let me. I gave some individual stuff about all the original guys. I got a couple of quick individual things about a couple of the other guys who were very important in the growth of Ultimate, even though they weren't in that original crew. Like people like when they left from Cornell, Derek Lent. When he started the Ultimate program at SUNY Purchase in New York. Some of the greatest players in the sport came through his program that he started. He was the first paid coach of Ultimate in that program. He started that program. And other people who went on and played in other places. And there are lots of national and world titles here. In fact, there next to Derek right now is Howard Jaffe, he had just started playing. He was a role player in '78 for us. He was just okay. Go and get this guy's face and cover him and make sure he hates you by the end of the game. And he was very good at that. But he went from here. He went to med school at Yale, right? And then finally made his way to the Bay Area in San Francisco and became one of the main handlers for the crew out there that dominated for a couple of few years. How many titles did you guys have? They won nationals twice with Howie being one of the main handlers. Chris. We'll save Chris a little bit more. We'll go to Chris now. So after 78, we went to about 6 of us went to Boston. Joe was there already, right? Stick was going to be there already anyhow. It was already there. Toby was already there. I brought Paul, and Jimmy wasn't. He was kind of going there, but he didn't know where he was going. But he was from there anyhow, so it wasn't too hard to convince him he needed to play in that team, right? So we basically had a pretty good core and met up with half of the Hampshire crew and had a team that should have been certainly one of the favorites to win nationals that year. But and that was the first year they had the regions, and you had to win your region. There were going to be multiple teams at nationals. So we just had to go through the formality of crushing all the teams at regionals in '79 before we could go and win the nationals. And in I guess it was the semifinals of that walk through regionals for us. We almost had a bye basically to the finals because we had to play the leftover buds. There was nothing left. It was just, all of us all-stars playing against what was the leftovers on the buds in the semis. Couldn't have been any easier. Except those leftovers included the finals.
Dawson won the winners bracket.
The Bud. We won. So the Buds had to come through Columbia in the losers bracket twice in the same day.
Lost to him, got put in the winners bracket, and then beat him.
Lost to them in the first round, beat them in the what would be the semis to get to play against us.
Get to play the gods of Ultimate.
Yes.
Right. 18-0.
And
We're no longer buds.
unfortunately, those dregs included CBB, Danny Weiss, Jim Garter, Chris Byrne, Carl Barr, Bill Sherman, Space, Andy Kerner, he's here. Lance, Paul Adams, Paul Berg, who's not here, but all these guys who I didn't even know who most of them were that year. I knew CBB, I knew Danny, I knew a couple of them. I knew who they were. The others, I knew Bill Sherman. But the obvious thing, is that it wasn't really even that close. They beat us pretty soundly. I don't remember what the score was, but they totally outplayed us. Totally outplayed us by 1 point. And the problem was, we hadn't played together. We didn't have any kind of system. And we were not playing. If we had just put all of our ex-buds in, we would have known how to play together. But there was no clicking. We didn't know what to do when we got pressed in a close game. And so, yeah, we weren't playing great, but the reason we weren't playing great was those young buds were playing tremendous. And the longer the game stayed close, the more we had no chance whatsoever. Because then it was basically they were locked in on D, and the game was over, even though it stayed close the rest of the way. They were not gonna lose that game. And you know, it turns out in retrospect, I would say that in the seminal point in the history of the Buds of guaranteeing that they would be good for a long time was that win by that young crew. There was they had a bunch of beginners, and how psyched must they have been? They were all psyched to play really hard, recruit more people, and keep. So the program was guaranteed for the next bunch of years.
Beautiful move, John. Beautiful move.
Threw him out of the nest.
That's loyalty.
There's from that game, really that team was led by CVB and Danny Weiss, and the two of them after that year, they did okay. They both did okay in the rest of their ultimate careers. Chris went from playing as a beginner and making it to nationals with my buds. Created his own buds, took them to nationals, then left and decided to move to Chicago. Went and lived in Chicago, who had an ultimate team of basically, they had a bunch of professional Frisbee players who was on the individual circuit. There were guys there that made their livings driving around in vans, putting on Frisbee shows. They'd been playing ultimate for years too, but they were never a threat. They never did anything. They were never any good at ultimate. They didn't know how to play winning ultimate. Chris got there. How long did it take to win the national championship with those guys once you got there?
A year and a half.
And a year and a half later, all these guys that had been around forever and never did anything were the national champs.
Yes.
What was different? Paul Berg went with Chris there from that team. Danny Weiss left that '79 team and went all the way west to the Bay Area to San Francisco and played with Howie on that circus team. They did okay too. They won a couple of national championships. Then he decided to move. So he found a way to move back to New York because I guess he realized that the circus wasn't going to keep winning forever, and that there might be some good actions coming along in New York pretty soon. So he went back to New York, and how many times did Danny win?
Six.
Danny won only 6 national titles with New York. So basically, Chris left Chicago and said, "Well, that's enough with these guys. I showed them how to play. I showed them how to play." Because Chris went to Seattle. Seattle's been a hotbed of all kinds of Frisbee for forever. Freestyle, overall players. They had leagues of ultimate players.
2007.
I wonder, actually, is a founder of Seattle Ultimate? Anybody here start the Seattle Ultimate?
Yes.
Bill and I started the Ultimate in Seattle. But apparently, Bill didn't have what it takes to win the national championship. So when he was finished with Chicago, CVB moved to Seattle. How long were you in Seattle before they won it all?
Seattle won.
Yeah.
I had left by then.
Well, Seattle got pretty good. Then you how many like masters and titles? Then you played with the Keg Warriors.
Yeah, Keg Warriors.
They won.
It's a beautiful game, people, isn't it?
Anyhow, from all those old buds, Jimmy Herrick left and went and played in San Diego. He's played everywhere. He decided that winning an ultimate title would, that required help from other people. So he decided, well, heck, I'll just become the best Frisbee player in the world. Jimmy Herrick won the individual overall world championship.
Yeah.
He had his plane tickets to be here this week until he got Poison Oak last weekend. But anyhow, Jimmy Herrick's is an Ultimate Hall of Famer. CVB is an Ultimate Hall of Famer. Danny Weiss is an Ultimate Hall of Famer.
JC is the ultimate Hall of Famer. Football brother Hall of Famer.
I'll go out on a limb and say that at the end of this year there will be another one, but I won't say any more about that. But there will be a fifth one very, very soon.
Who am I supposed to vote for, JC?
I'll give you guys your voting instructions when it's time.
Just follow John. That's the story.
But that covers my era of the Buds and the handoff to the creator of the next era of the Buds, Danny and Chris and the other crew that are here. Anything? I just to say a couple other things. First of all, I want to thank a few people for this whole weekend thing. This was a lot of work involved, a lot of people involved. First, let's start with last night out at CVB's parents' house. We had a great get together. It was mostly elderly folks. There weren't that many walkers, but we were all able to walk around by ourselves. But I'd like to thank CVB, his wife Lori, his sister Michelle, who did lots of the organizing, all the food and catering, and taking care of all that, and his parents for up their house.
Hey, we want to hear about the Rubik's Cube party. What happened there? You missed it.
I'd also like to thank the guy who's, is from my end, all I